Welcome back to Global Eye. Today, we're telling a story that goes beyond Hollywood nepotism and easy advantages. This is about two brothers who shared the same legendary father, but chose completely different paths to prove themselves. Kiefer Sutherland, born in 1966, became a household name through grit, risk-taking, and refusing to let his father's shadow define him. Rosif Sutherland, born 12 years later in 1978, grew up in Paris speaking French, initially wanted nothing to do with acting, and had to forge his own identity while watching both his father and half-brother become icons. Their father, Donald Sutherland, passed away in June 2024 at age 88, leaving behind one of the most remarkable legacies in film history. But what Donald also left behind was a masterclass in parenting creative children. He discouraged them from acting, refused to give them easy opportunities, and forced them to find their own way. And both Kiefer and Rosif have spoken about how that tough love approach, that refusal to hand them anything, ultimately made them better actors and stronger people. This isn't just a story about famous sons following their famous father. This is about the complex relationship between legacy and identity, about proving yourself when everyone assumes you didn't earn it, and about two brothers from different mothers who both had to answer the same impossible question. How do you step out of Donald Sutherland's shadow when that shadow stretches across 6 decades of cinema history? If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're diving deep into the Sutherland family dynasty, the challenges of Hollywood legacy, and how Kiefer and Rosif each found their own authentic path. Let's get started to understand Kiefer and Rosif's journeys. You first need to understand what it meant to be Donald Sutherland's son. Donald wasn't just successful, he was legendary. Born in Canada in 1935, he became one of cinema's most versatile and respected actors, starring in over 200 films and television shows across a career spanning 6 decades. His roles in Ma's *H, Clute, Don't Look Now, Ordinary People, JFK, and later, The Hunger Games franchise made him an icon to multiple generations of moviegoers. Donald was known for choosing interesting, challenging roles over commercial success. He played villains, heroes, complicated anti-heroes, and everything in between. He worked with the greatest directors of his era and was considered one of the finest actors never to receive an Academy Award nomination during his active career. Though he was given an honorary Oscar in 2017, recognizing his lifetime of extraordinary work, directors loved him because he brought intelligence and nuance to every role. Audiences loved him because he was magnetic on screen, capable of being menacing, romantic, comedic, or tragic with equal skill. But being Donald Sutherland's son came with enormous pressure. Everyone assumed his children would go into acting, that they'd use their father's connections to get ahead, that they'd ride his coattails rather than earning their own success. Donald understood this danger, which is why he took an unusual approach to parenting his children who expressed interest in acting. He didn't encourage them. He didn't open doors for them. In fact, he actively tried to discourage them from following in his footsteps. Kiefer later revealed, "Both of my parents were quite disappointed that this was what I wanted to do." That wasn't rejection. That was a father who knew how brutal the entertainment industry could be, who understood that fame comes with costs, and who wanted his children to choose acting because they couldn't imagine doing anything else. Not because it seemed like an easy path. Donald had 5 children total, twins, Kiefer and Rachel, with his second wife, Shirley Douglas, and Rogue, Rosif, and Angus with his third wife, Francine Rosset. Each child had to find their own relationship with their father's legacy and their own path forward. Kiefer William Frederick Dempsey George Rufus Sutherland was born December 21, 1966. In London, England, along with his twin sister Rachel, his parents, Donald Sutherland and Shirley Douglas herself, the daughter of Canadian politician Tommy Douglas, divorced when Kiefer was just 4 years old. He spent his childhood shuttling between his mother in Toronto and his father in Los Angeles. Never quite feeling settled in either place, Kiefer's first acting role came when he was a teenager in Max Duggan Returns in 1983, which happened to star his father. But that was one of the few times Donald helped open a door. After that, Kiefer was on his own. His breakthrough came in 1984 with The Bay Boy, a Canadian film that earned him a Genie Award nomination for Best Actor when he was just 17 years old. That early success proved he had genuine talent, not just a famous last name. Throughout the 1980s, Kiefer built his career through smart choices and relentless work. He starred in Stand By Me, one of the most beloved coming-of-age films of all time. He became a teen idol with The Lost Boys, playing a charismatic vampire. He anchored the Young Guns franchise as Doc Holliday. He proved his dramatic range in films like Flatliners and A Few Good Men. Each role showed a different facet of his talent and established him as a serious actor in his own right. Not just Donald Sutherland's son, but Kiefer's defining role came in 2001 with the television series 24, where he played Jack Bauer, a counterterrorism agent racing against time to stop threats to national security. The show was revolutionary in its real-time format and its willingness to show a protagonist who wasn't always heroic, who sometimes had to make brutal choices in the name of protecting his country. Kiefer won an Emmy and a Golden Globe for the role, and the character became so iconic that Jack Bauer is now taught in military and law enforcement training as an example of operational decision-making under pressure. 2 ran for 8 seasons, plus a limited series revival, making Kiefer one of television's highest-paid actors and cementing his status as a star, independent of his father's legacy. He continued working in film and eventually launched a successful music career, releasing country albums that showcased yet another dimension of his artistry. Kiefer posed with Donald and brothers Rosif and Rogue for the Hollywood Reporter's Hollywood Legacies issue, a powerful image of 3 generations of Sutherland talent. While Kiefer was building his Hollywood career, his half-brother Rosif was growing up in a completely different world. Born Rosif Rosif Sutherland on September 25, 1978, in Vancouver, Rosif was raised primarily in Paris by his mother, Francine Rosset, a French-Canadian actress, and Donald. He grew up speaking fluent French, attending European schools, and living far from Hollywood's influence. His name came from French director Frédéric Rosif, whom Francine had worked with in 2013. Rosif told the New York Post, "I never really had an interest in being an actor, but I was always in awe of what my father did. I knew how talented he was. It was just never something that I thought I could do or wanted to do. I didn't want to be other people. That's the extent of what I thought acting was." That statement reveals so much about Rosif's perspective. He witnessed his father's genius, but didn't see himself in that world. He was a writer and singer, pursuing completely different creative outlets. Rosif's ambition was never to be an actor. He grew up in Paris, far from Hollywood, and spent his time writing and singing. He attended Princeton University, one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world, where he studied subjects completely unrelated to entertainment. But something changed during his university years. Whether it was exposure to theater, seeing his father and half-brothers work from a new perspective, or simply discovering that acting could be something more than he'd initially understood, Rosif began to reconsider. He made his acting debut in 2003 with Timeline, a science fiction film, and quickly discovered that he had inherited his father's gift for inhabiting complex characters. But Rosif's career trajectory was completely different from Kiefer's. Instead of chasing leading roles in major Hollywood films, Rosif focused on challenging character work in independent films and quality television. He appeared in TV series including The Handmaid's Tale and 3 Pines, and films like Possessor and River. Sources noted. However challenging it was to start a career in the shadows of his very successful father and brother, Sutherland's love of the work has driven him to commit wholeheartedly to the privileged life of experiencing the life of others. That phrase, "in the shadows," captures Rosif's unique challenge. He wasn't just competing with his father's legacy like Kiefer had, he was also competing with his half-brother's massive success. Rosif had to prove himself twice over. Had to establish that he wasn't riding on 2 famous Sutherland's coattails, but had earned his place through his own talent and dedication. Being a Sutherland in Hollywood is complicated. On one hand, the name opens doors. Casting directors take meetings, scripts get sent, there's immediate recognition and a baseline of respect. On the other hand, every accomplishment is questioned. Every role earned feels like it might have been given. Every positive review comes with the unspoken caveat. But of course, he's talented. Look at his father. Both Kiefer and Rosif have had to navigate this reality their entire careers. In the Hollywood Reporter interview, the discussion centered around letting kids find their own way, which perfectly captures Donald's parenting philosophy. He gave his sons the gift of having to struggle, having to prove themselves, having to earn their success rather than being handed it. That approach made things harder in the short term but stronger in the long term. Neither Kiefer nor Rosif can be dismissed as nepotism. Beneficiaries, because they both worked for decades building careers that stand on their own merits, has been particularly vocal about the pressure of living up to his father's reputation. He said that when he was starting out, people would watch his performances looking for Donald's mannerisms or delivery, trying to see if Kiefer was copying his father or forging his own style. That scrutiny could have been paralyzing, but instead, it pushed Kiefer to be more intentional about his choices, to ensure that every role he took felt authentic to who he was as an actor, rather than an imitation of who his father had been. Rosif faced a different but equally challenging dynamic. By the time he started acting in 2003, his father had been a legend for decades, and his half-brother had already established himself as a major star. Rosif could have easily been dismissed as the third Sutherland trying to cash in on the family name. Instead, he focused on work that genuinely interested him, choosing projects based on artistic merit rather than commercial potential. His performances in series like The Handmaid's Tale, where he played complex, morally ambiguous characters, showed that he'd inherited not just his father's talent, but his willingness to take risks and play difficult roles. The burden of legacy is feeling like you can never escape comparisons, like your work will always be measured against someone else's achievements. But the gift of legacy is having a model of excellence, knowing what greatness looks like, understanding the work ethic and dedication required to sustain a career over decades. Both Kiefer and Rosif received that gift from Donald, and both have paid it forward through their own work for decades. Donald and Kiefer worked in the same industry, but never shared meaningful screen time together beyond Kiefer's early role as a teenager. They'd appeared in several of the same films over the years, but never had scenes together, as if both understood that keeping their professional lives separate helped maintain Kiefer's independence. But in 2016, that finally changed. Donald and Kiefer Sutherland co-starred in director John Casser's Western film Forsaken, marking the first time the father and son appeared on screen together in a shared scene. The film told the story of a gunslinger returning home to reconcile with his estranged father, making the real-life family dynamic add incredible depth to the performances. When promoting the movie, Kiefer said, "He's someone I wanted to work with for my whole career." Think about what that statement reveals. Kiefer had spent 40 years building a career, had become one of television's biggest stars, had earned critical acclaim and financial success, and yet working with his father was still something he'd dreamed of his entire career. The film gave them both the opportunity to bring their real relationship, with all its complexity and distance and love, to a fictional story that mirrored their reality in profound ways. The experience of making Forsaken together was reportedly emotional for both Donald and Kiefer. They were playing estranged father and son trying to bridge a gap created by years of absence and miscommunication, and much of that dynamic reflected their actual relationship. Donald had been absent for much of Kiefer's childhood. Kiefer had spent his life simultaneously trying to honor his father's legacy and escape its shadow. The film allowed them to explore those tensions in a safe, creative space and perhaps find some healing through the work. Rosif never got the same opportunity to work directly with Donald in a major film, though they did appear in some projects together. But Rosif has spoken about watching his father work, learning from observing Donald's preparation and commitment, and how that influenced his own approach to acting, even when they weren't sharing the screen. On June 20th, 2024, Donald Sutherland passed away at age 88. The news devastated not just his family, but the entire film community that had been enriched by his work for 6 decades. Kiefer posted an emotional tribute on social media with a heavy heart. "I tell you that my father, Donald Sutherland, has passed away. I personally think one of the most important actors in the history of film, never daunted by a role, good, bad, or ugly. He loved what he did and did what he loved, and one can never ask for more than that." That tribute captured everything essential about Donald, his fearlessness, his dedication, his joy in the work. The following day, Kiefer added, "My family and I have been overwhelmed by the outpouring of condolences and support over the last 24 hours. Thank you very much." The grief was shared by millions who had grown up watching Donald's films, who had been moved by his performances, and who understood that cinema had lost one of its true greats. For Kiefer and Rosif, losing their father meant more than losing a parent. It meant losing the measuring stick against which they'd spent their entire careers being compared. It meant the end of the possibility of future collaborations, of reconciliations, of conversations about craft and legacy. It meant inheriting the responsibility of carrying forward the Sutherland name in Hollywood, without the man who made that name mean something. But Donald's death also freed his sons in a way that no longer would their work be constantly compared to his. No longer would every role they took be analyzed through the lens of whether it measured up to Donald's choices. They could finally step fully into their own legacies, honoring their father's memory. The shadow that had defined so much of their professional lives was gone, replaced by the light of their own accomplishments. At 58 years old, Kiefer Sutherland continues to be one of Hollywood's most respected actors. He's working on new film and television projects, touring with his country music, and serving as an inspiration for a new generation of actors who grew up watching 24. His career has demonstrated that it's possible to step out of a legendary father's shadow and create a legacy entirely your own. Kiefer didn't just become a successful actor, despite being Donald Sutherland's son. He became a different kind of star, one defined by television rather than film, by intensity and physicality rather than his father's more cerebral approach. Rosif, now 47, has built a remarkable career focused on quality over quantity. His recent work in Murder, in a Small Town alongside Kristen Kruk, has earned critical acclaim and shown that he's hitting his stride as a leading man. He's worked consistently in both Canadian and American productions, proving that there are multiple paths to success in the entertainment industry, and that you don't have to chase Hollywood fame to build a meaningful career. Both brothers have also become fathers themselves, facing the challenge of raising children who will grow up as third-generation Sutherlands in the entertainment world. Kiefer has a daughter, Sarah Sutherland, who is herself an actress, continuing the family tradition. Rosif married Selena Sinden in 2016, and they have a son together. The question for both Kiefer and Rosif now is the same one their father faced. How do you encourage your children to follow their own path while also sharing the wisdom and experience you've gained from your own career? The Sutherland story is ultimately about the complex relationship between legacy and identity. Donald Sutherland became a legend by being fearless, by choosing interesting work over safe work, by committing fully to every role regardless of budget or prestige. Kiefer Sutherland found his own path by embracing television when film actors still looked down on the medium, by playing a character so physically demanding and psychologically intense that it defined an era. Rosif Sutherland carved out his space by refusing to chase fame, by focusing on character work that challenged him, and by proving that you can build a sustainable career without becoming a household name. Each Sutherland chose differently, worked differently, defined success differently, but all three shared a commitment to the craft, a refusal to coast on talent alone, and an understanding that acting is about more than fame or money. It's about telling stories, exploring human nature, and leaving something behind that matters. Donald did that for 6 decades. Kiefer has been doing it for 40 years, and Rosif is building his own body of work that will endure long after the comparisons to his father and brother finally fade away. The Sutherland sons, Kiefer and Rosif, found their own way not by rejecting their father's legacy, but by refusing to be defined by it. They took different paths, made different choices, built different kinds of careers, but both honored Donald Sutherland by committing to excellence the way he always did. Their story reminds us that legacy is both a burden and a gift. That being born with advantages doesn't diminish your accomplishments if you earn them through hard work, and that sometimes the best thing a parent can do is refuse to make things easy for their children. Donald Sutherland changed cinema. Kiefer Sutherland changed television. Rosif Sutherland is building a career defined by artistic integrity. 3 generations of Sutherlands, each making their mark, each finding their own way, each proving that talent and dedication matter more than any famous last name. What's your perspective on Hollywood legacies? Is it harder or easier to succeed when you're born into a famous family? And which Sutherland's career path do you find most impressive? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the Sutherland family inspiring, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more stories about Hollywood dynasties and the people who shaped cinema. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Thanks for watching, And remember, your legacy is what you make of it, not what you're given.